Konrad Lorenz, the great Austrian naturalist, had a young gosling imprint on him, and he worked out that the goose was following its instincts, but its instincts were leading it astray. I've reflected on that for some time, and I especially go back to the story of the Garden of Eden. It's interesting, two verbs are used in the story of Adam and Eve in this particular context. The first is God called them, and the second is God drove them out. And it got me to thinking in my bizarre way, what is the difference between being called and being driven? Now, the instincts about which Lorenz spoke are basically described as to survive, to love and belong, to be free, to have power, and maybe controversially, to have fun. If those are our instincts and they're hardwired into us, how can we possibly be blamed if we use them? Why would they be there otherwise? So is it the case that it is the enemy of our souls that drives us and our Creator who calls us? As if our instincts are fundamentally wrong, dangerous, to be avoided or caged up, and that God's purpose is to help us frustrate them, control them, do not yield to them, certainly do not enjoy them. Whereas the enemy says, go on, we're all the same. Do it, everybody's doing it. So that's a very simplistic contrast between being driven and being called. We can refine it a little bit, I think, to say, if we are called to give. If we are driven to get. We may look, for instance, at Bill Gates, for the large majority of his life driven to get. For the second part of his life, absolutely committed to giving. I speak as not only an Anglican priest, but a Rotarian. And Gates has dedicated hundreds of millions of dollars towards the fight to eradicate polio, and is now moving on to malaria. So it is possible for a part of their life for someone to be driven, and then midlife to be converted to give. Or perhaps we are driven to be sure that we're always right. Consider Saul, driven by his upbringing, by tradition, absolutely right, not fair to be challenged. God whispered in his ear, struck him blind in fact, and then called him. It seems to me that between being driven and being called, it's really that difference I spoke of a moment ago. Over one's life as a whole, God is calling one to give. Over one's life as a whole, the enemy is driving one to get. Our conversion point may be midlife, it may have been true all of our lives, but our calling, I think, is to be called by God rather than be driven by our own instincts and wherever they came from. And I'm thinking of Genesis chapter 2. You don't really need me to spell it out again. Thank you.